Good morning. I appreciate everybody coming out to TVIB Talks today. Hope you're all doing well. And just want to take some time today and share some of the things that we've been seeing throughout the fleet. So I'm Ken Lamp. I'm the operations manager for the lower fleet. As we've gone through our surveys and through our other activities, we've identified about 27 to 28 deficiencies having to do with fire extinguishers, portable, as well as semi-portable. We thought we'd take the time today to just address any questions, go through the requirements for those. At this point, we'll just kind of kick it off and see how things are going. So some of the topics of our discussion today, we're going to talk about the NFPA, or the National Fire Protection Act, number 10. Latest revision was in 2018, and the standards for portable fire extinguishers. From there, we're going to talk about examination and testing of portable fire extinguishing equipment, and then go over the crosswalk. In April of 2018, the Coast Guard released a policy letter that provided new and updated regulations for the industry as far as portable and semi-portable fire extinguishers, locations, number required on board the vessel, and just overall maintenance requirements in accordance with NFPA 10. And then we'll talk about our certificates of inspection with all the renewals coming out and the surveys. What exactly are we looking for, and do we have the right information on the COI, as well as discuss the documentation required to be kept on board the vessel. So again, NFPA 10, released in 2018, talks about portable fire extinguishers and semi-portable fire extinguishers and anything really having to do with those. Right out of the gate, wanted to define a portable versus semi-portable, so we make sure our nomenclature is, all the same and we're all speaking the same language as we work our way through the process. So portable fire extinguishers are rated for the class of fire they're suitable for. And the ratings displayed on the side of the extinguisher. The higher the number indicates the extinguisher is more effective for that class of fire. You've got your Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta fires, and each extinguishing device is going to be designed to put out that type of fire or to help fight that fire and minimize the damage it's going to cause. There are two main types of portable fire extinguishers that we're going to discuss. One is handheld, and normally that's about 1 pound to 31 pounds. And just easily portable. And then we've got our cart mounted, we call them a semi-portable. They're also known as wheeled and typically weigh more than 51 pounds. And we'll touch on those a little bit toward the end of this. So just want to take a minute and look over the fire extinguisher itself, look over the sticker and really what the requirements are. We want to make sure that we have the right fire extinguisher as indicated by the COI for the area that it is being stored or installed in. We want to make sure the classification, in this case, you can see 4 Alpha or a 60 Bravo Charlie. That's going to give you your performance-based measurements or rating for that fire extinguisher. It's tested ANSI or UL approved. It is marine type, certified by the U.S. Coast Guard. And then we've got our older coding on here, and this is where the crosswalk's going to come in here in just a little bit. We'll talk about that. But this is a size 2 or a Bravo Charlie size 2 as well. And then it gives you your approval number. And then one important item we want to take a look at on here is the bracket. What bracket is supposed to be with this extinguisher? And you can see here it identifies it's valid only with that approved bracket. So we do get a lot of questions concerning the bracket. Just want to take a minute with that and kind of share some of the brackets that are out there and what we're looking for. As indicated on the fire extinguisher prior, we were looking for an 809. This is a solid metal bracket. It's got a clamping mechanism. You can adjust it so the tension or the holding mechanism is sufficient for the fire extinguisher you're using it on. And then it's got a lockout pin that's going to prevent anything from falling out. Now we want to make sure that we are utilizing Coast Guard brackets. And we have had some appeals or requests for consideration where we've worked through that process with the NCOE and ran it up to CBC. You may be thinking, well, I've got the ones that have the rubber strap, that have the tightening locations or grommets on them. We have been told that that is acceptable. The big thing we're looking for here is, does it fit the extinguisher? Is it rated for that extinguisher? And is it holding it securely and going to prevent it from falling and ended up looking like the extinguisher we got there on the right? You can see there we're just using a small traditional hook, might be utilized in a residential, and we have seen these on some vessels. It's just, it won't hold it if you're working down the passageway, carrying equipment, and these are things that we want to make sure that we identify and address. You can see quite a bit is wrong with this extinguisher. Handle's broken, pin's been removed, it's out of pressure, or the indicating device is showing that it's been extinguished. So this is what we want to avoid. I mentioned earlier UL approval. They used to have a UL approval or equivalency for the fire extinguishers, where if they were not Coast Guard approved or UL approved, you could go to the website and pull up that extinguisher and identify whether or not it was equivalent. 1804, the policy letter released in 2018, addresses that and has superseded that guidance and information. So that's going to be our bread and butter policy letter to go to for the for fire extinguishers is 1804. With that website, I've included the web address here, productiq.ulprospector.com. This is a free website. I've registered on it, myself, and it makes it easy if I need to go into an UL 217 for a portable smoke detector, or want to find out if the extinguisher in this case is actually what I need, or if what I have is equivalent and is rated for marine use. So those are some of the questions that can be answered on this website. Again, very user-friendly, so great tool for you. So next we want to talk about the exam and testing requirements for portable fire extinguishing equipment. 46 CFR 142-240 A1 is what takes us out to the NFPA Chapter 10, or NFPA 10, Chapter 7 and 8, and provides us all of our guidance. So we always talk about applicability and how do we get out of subchapter M and into our next reference. This is the site that you'll use that takes you directly out to NFPA 10 for your inspection and testing. So some of the things we want to talk about that are required within NFPA 10 are monthly surveys or inspections. These can be done by the owner managing operator and the person in charge or a designated member of the crew. Remember, you want to articulate this or identify that individual within your TSMS so that that has been identified and they've got the training and the information they need to perform this monthly inspection. From there, we move on to our annuals, or every 12 months, and this is in accordance with the NFPA 10, and it's either a certified person or it can be a designated crew member if the extinguishing system that you're using is non-rechargeable or non-refillable. If it is rechargeable or refillable, it'll need to be done by a certified person, and you'll want to make sure that you retain those records. The owner or managing operator as well needs to make sure they can provide objective evidence in the form of records, testing, inspections, tags, but tangible objective evidence that shows that the required servicing is being done, and that needs to be able to be readily provided to your Coast Guard Marine Inspector or to your TPO if requested. We want to make sure that we keep those records for at least 1 year, and there are a couple different ways for you to retain those. Your towing vessel record, your official logbook, or in accordance with your vessel's TSMS. So if you've got Synex or TowWorks or different systems that help you maintain your maintenance, and that's where you identify and capture everything, identify that within your TSMS, and you can utilize that as your records. From there, you're pretty much set up, but now the concern is, are we able to provide those records for the equipment? Does the equipment meet all the inspection criteria that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes? And just, is it ready to roll? If it's not, we end up heading kind of a different direction, and the Coast Guard or the TPO can require that all maintenance is conducted by a certified technician from a qualified facility. So those are some of the things that we need to really be aware of. If your designated person is taking care of it, we've got them identified in the TISMIS, and they've got a maintenance procedure or a inspection procedure that they're signing off, and we want to keep those records for at least 1 year. So just talking about some of the survey procedures, I pulled this right out of the NFPA 10 and just want to share these with you. Some of it is common sense stuff, but some of it might be things that you could add or work with. Right out of the gate, is the equipment in its designated place? If your vessel has a fire control plan or on your COI articulates that you need to have extinguishers in certain locations, or if your TISMIS identifies that you want an extra extinguisher in a certain area, bottom line, they should be readily accessible within a passageway or an entrance or exit to a space, so they're ready to go in case of emergency. We want to make sure that the access to the fire extinguisher is not obstructed, that the operating instructions face outwards and they're legible. A lot of the time these will get scraped up because you're taking them in and out of their bracket. You want to make sure that those stickers and the instructions are there and can be read. Any of your seals or tamper indicators are not broken, missing, or in need of replacement. We want to make sure the pressure gauge or indicating device, if provided, is operable and in range, not cracked or damaged, hanging loose, or anything that would impair its ability to actually provide you accurate information. We want to make sure there's no evidence of corrosion or physical damage. If they're dented or they have corrosion, they're actually to be taken out of service and need to be replaced. You can verify the pull pin functions properly and examine for damage or corrosion by removing the pull pin. This is what the NFPA 10 states. Personally, I don't pull the pins out, just provides an opportunity for an accidental discharge if you're not familiar with the device. So pull the pin when you're getting ready to use it, just make sure it's not bent, damaged, and that it moves freely within the location that it's stowed. Verify that the nozzle or hose assembly is unobstructed and in good working order. Look for any cracks. Make sure that the nose of the cone is in good condition. Nobody's used it for stuffing paper towels up and inside of. It's amazing what those discharge nozzles can get used for sometimes. So we just want to make sure they're ready to go. Again, we want to make sure that the extinguisher has the minimum UL rating for the space it's intended to protect. So that's going to be identified when you get your COI based on your length or gross tonnage or horsepower rating within the vessel. We want to make sure that everything is where it's intended to be. Example of this is the paint locker requires at least a 40 Bravo. And if the existing B2 is also rated for a 40B or greater, the extinguisher is in compliance. If it's not, it could be a B2, but it's not at least a 40 Bravo for the performance indicator, then that extinguisher is not in compliance, and we want to move that out of there and get the right one. And we want to make sure the hanger bracket is the correct one. We've already discussed that, but we really want to make sure it's properly adjusted and in good working order. The retaining pin is in place and the bracket bushings are present. On the 809, you'll notice that there's actually rubber bushings on the interior retaining arm, and we want to make sure those are in place so we don't have metal on metal scratching the paint off, which allows for corrosion and really starts to increase the opportunity for degradation of your extinguisher. Some of the other things we want to take a look at, and we've talked about just a little bit, verify that it's in compliance with all these things that we've just discussed. We want to make sure our monthly inspections are getting done, annual maintenance and servicing, rechargeable extinguishers, non-rechargeable or annual maintenance, limited to the scope of the monthly inspections, extinguishers in service for no more than 12 years if it's a non-rechargeable, and then your hydrostatic testing date. For your CO2, you're looking at every 5 years, and for an extinguisher of a dry chem type or dry chemical, you're looking to every 12 years. So if you've exceeded the 5-year on CO2 or 12-year on a dry chem, you'll want to make sure that that extinguisher is removed and you've got a plan in place to track those. We talk about the bracket and we talk about stowage. Some of the things we want to make sure of is that the extinguisher is no less than 4 inches off the deck. So we're looking at a minimum of 4 inches. If the extinguisher is greater than 40 pounds, no greater than 3.5 feet to the top of the extinguisher. And if it's less than 40 pounds, we're looking at 5 feet. So 4 inches off the deck, 3.5 for 40, 5 for less than 40. And all this information is contained within the NFPA 10 if you have any questions. And you can also pull up the policy letter 1804, and that'll help provide you some additional guidance. Flammable storage lockers. We all talk about these quite a bit. We want to make sure that for any of our flammable storage lockers that provide easy accessibility. We want to make sure it's free from any blocking by storage and equipment, or both of those. We want to make sure that it is near the flammable locker. We want to make sure it's free from potential of any physical damage, and we want to make sure that the extinguisher is readily visible. So in 6.3.11, it gives us what our hazards are and what we're looking at. So this is the table for a Bravo type or a hazardous locker type extinguisher. And you can see that we've got a basic minimum extinguisher rating of 40B is what's required. So we're looking for a maximum travel distance of no greater than 30 feet. And that 30 feet includes, do I have to go around the skiff on the back of the boat? Do I have to move around something? We want to make sure these extinguishers are readily accessible and easy to get to. So not up above all the garbage storage, or I'm not saying you can't mount them to the flammable storage locker, but it compromises the UL rating of the locker. And personally, I don't want to be reaching for something to put out the fire and have to reach through the fire or work my way around the fire. So that provides us with our definition and information for near. So I hope that answers your question. Again, I know we've had a lot of questions about that specifically. Semi-portable. We do have some questions about this. We're still trying to see in or derive from 1804 what exactly the location is. When our vessels were uninspected and regulated under subchapter C, specifically it said that these could be stored in the engine room. They're for that space. They're to protect that space. Looking through 1804, and I'm sure based on the COI renewals and the Coast Guard inspection, the CFR does indicate permanently affixed, but we aren't operating in heavy seas. We're operating, majority of us, on the western rivers. So we just want to make sure that it's secured, readily accessible, and that we can get it into operation as quickly as possible. So if your vessel is less than 3 nautical miles or built before 2003, it's an either or situation. You can have the 160 Bravo or a fixed system. And then if you operate greater than 3 nautical miles offshore, you're looking for a 160 Bravo or a B5, depending on the age of it, and also that fixed firefighting system. So this is the policy letter 1804, again came out in 2018, April 3rd. This is the chart that's provided for any of the vessels under 65 feet. So in this case, you can have a Bravo 1, and that's the equivalent of a 10 BC. And then based on the length of the vessel, that is going to tell you how many you need and where they need to be located, or if you need a fixed system. And then also on this, we have the opportunity, if you have 140 BC, that is the equivalent of 2 BC or B1 handheld portable fire extinguishers. So 65 and below, you have an opportunity for an equivalency. Now, I did get asked, does this carry over to 65 and above? And we've had this discussion, worked through the NCOE, and had some great talks with them. And that equivalency does not pertain, or it's not applicable to the vessels greater than 65 feet. So in this case, we're looking at a B2, or under the new performance factor is a 40 Bravo Charlie or a 40 BC. And in the engine room as well, for every 1,000 horsepower of the main engine, you're looking at an additional 40 Bravo. You can see that I've blocked out the information on here and actually shared it with the NCOE while we're working through this, that the charts within the policy letter do not match what is within the CFR. So policy letter is not regulation, and we're going with what the reg states, which is 140 Bravo per 1,000 brake horsepower, not to exceed 6. That's what the blank is. I mentioned that I've talked with the NCOE, and a couple of the findings that have been coming out and been readily identified on COI renewals or Coast Guard mid-period inspections. These extinguishers are not necessarily in the engine room. Those engine room dedicated fire extinguishers must be stored within the engineering room space or in the engineering space. So if you've got it stowed outside of that space, but you have that number on board, you aren't in compliance. You'll need to make sure you get all the extinguishers within that engine room and get them properly mounted throughout the space. So certificate of inspection. We just talked a little bit about horsepower and the impacts or the drive that it has on what is required as far as our portable fire extinguishing systems. So just an example, a lot of you may be looking at a repower. We've talked about that. We've had a lot of those done. And we really get into the design verification and a lot of the other items and focus on the repower. But sometimes we forget that, let's say we're running two 1,800 main diesel engines, 1,800 horse. Well, we're at 3,600 horsepower. Now we bring in two 4,000 or 2,000 horsepower engines. Now we're at 4,000. So we actually need to make the adjustment and add a fire extinguisher based on that horsepower rating. And we need to make sure when we're talking with the Coast Guard, we ask that gets amended on our COIs and we bring that up. When we go through the renewal process and we check that box on the 3752, it says, hey, we've done a repower, we've gone through a process, they should be looking at, did that horsepower increase and are all requirements being met as far as firefighting and other applicable regulations. So just something to keep in the forefront of your mind as you're working through those repowers. 1804 provided some guidance that was pushed out to the Coast Guard while they're working on your COIs. And COI should note the grandfathered extinguisher currently on board is in accordance with regulations. So if you've got the older ones, the B2s, the B1s, depending on what platform length and gross tonnage you're running as well as horsepower, that's not a bad thing. But once it expires, we want to make sure that we move over to the new performance-based rating and we use the UL nomenclature. So 40 Bravo is what's going to be installed in place of a B2. So we want to make sure that that's all being addressed and taken care of as we work our way through. We just want to make sure those records of inspection and test must be recorded. We talked about the TVR, the official logbook, in accordance with TISMAS applicable to the vessel, as well as a supporting system. One thing we didn't mention was it can be on a tag as indicated by the servicing company that you contracted out to do the work, but it needs to be signed, dated, and identify what was done and when your inspection periods are, as well as your expiration periods. Following minimum information is got to be required. We talked about that, the date when it was done and the test that was performed. They can relate a number to it. So sometimes you'll keep a log up in the pilot house and it'll say number 1, 2, 3, or 4, and those will relate to the documentation that can be reviewed by the Coast Guard or the TPO. We want to make sure we identify what the results of the inspections and testing were, as well as the name of the crew member, the surveyor, auditor, and any other individual that may have been conducting the inspection or test. And again, we want to make sure we keep all of that for at least 1 year. So that kind of wraps up portable fire extinguishers. Like I said, there's not a ton going on there, but there is a lot of small little things that can catch us and impact our operations. Some of the things we want to make sure we don't let happen. We don't want to let our deadlines pass. If we have a Coast Guard coming on board and we do not have the documentation and we're outside that window, now we do not have an approved firefighting capability as far as the COI and can go anywhere from a major nonconformity and unsafe condition to fixed on the spot and a conversation. Just really depends on who your surveyor is. If you're out there for TVIB, definitely something we need to be made aware of and work through the process with the company and the vessel on. Remember, those additional 40 Bravos need to be in the engine room, And one big question we have had, but I did not address while we were talking about flammable storage or hazmat. You are not required to add a 40 Bravo if you add an additional locker. So we've been asked, hey, I'm going to put another locker on the stern, and do I need to put another fire extinguisher in? At this time, as per the NCOE, you do not. The regulation calls for one additional 40 Bravo to be stored near your flammable storage locker, and near is 30 feet. So just wanted to share that with you. Well, I sure appreciate everybody's time. I don't want to sit and drag it on. I'll hang out for a while. So I appreciate it, and you'll be safe.